Hi folks, welcome to GitHub Pages, creating websites with GitHub Pages and Jekyll. I'm Evan Williamson. I'm the Digital Infrastructure Librarian at University of Idaho Library. Always excited to teach this workshop because, well, you get to create a bunch of websites, which is always cool. This workshop series is going to be 4 videos. This one, which is an introduction, is going to give you some background on the platform GitHub and GitHub Pages that we're going to use to create the websites, as well as cover some basics on Markdown and HTML. Second video is going to take you through some more detail and background on Jekyll, and then we're going to walk through actually creating a blog. This isn't a workshop about blogging, but it is a really good example just to introduce the basics and see how you can start creating some websites with Jekyll. Once we're all done with that, you're going to have a new website up and running, which is always exciting. And the third video is going to take us through some more advanced topics to introduce all the tools that Jekyll provides for you to start customizing your theme and building out your site in different ways. All of this we can do actually in the web browser. We're going to use the GitHub web interface, so you don't have to install anything at all. You can just start creating this content. The fourth video will be a little bit different. We're going to walk through the basics of how you use Jekyll locally on your own machine to do some development. So it's always a big hurdle to get all that software installed and get started. So hopefully this walkthrough of that workflow will help you go a little bit further. So the first thing you're going to need to prep for this workshop is a GitHub account. So if you don't have one, hop over to GitHub and just create one right now. You're going to have to verify your email before you can create any content. This is a hands-on workshop, so I hope you follow along. Put the video up in the corner of your screen and just open up GitHub, follow along, typing in all of this code into the editor. It's really the best way to learn just by doing it. Typing the stuff in, working on GitHub, and repeating and then repeating again. It's also going to be a lot more fun that way. Otherwise, it's going to be fairly boring watching me just do stuff. So get your GitHub account set up, verify your email, and then you're all set for the first 3 videos. Finally, check for a link down to this website that we're looking at right now in the video description if you're not there already, because you're going to want to have that up while you're following along, because it has links to all kinds of different resources, more detail, and snippets of code that you can copy and paste into your editor if you need to. So let's go ahead and get started on the intro section of the workshop. And this is an introduction to GitHub. So before we get any further, we better clarify these 3 terms that we have here: Git, GitHub, and GitHub Pages. So Git is actually a piece of software. It's a distributed version control system that is used to track the history of changes in a folder of files on your computer. So Git can be used on your personal computer, or it can be built into online services to track the development of a project over time. And so the most popular web platform for doing that is GitHub. And so they're a Git repository hosting service, basically a place where you can store and sync all of your project files online. So you can think of it kind of like Google Drive for code with really robust track changes baked in. So the whole thing is built around the version control of Git, but there's all these added on features like a handy web interface for editing, managing your files, and collaborating with other people. So a lot of project management just built into that system. It was originally designed, both Git and GitHub were originally designed for managing really large open source software projects, but their use has expanded to all kinds of folks and all kinds of organizations. So GitHub has over 40 million users, and it provides all kinds of handy features that you're going to want to make use of. One of those is GitHub Pages. And so GitHub Pages is free static web hosting that's available as part of every repository on GitHub. This means with a click of a button, you can just fire up a new website. And this is really intended to host pretty simple sites for your GitHub portfolio, for your open source software project, or for your project documentation. But really, it's a great solution for creating open educational resources like a workshop website, your personal site to highlight all your academic work, and do some of that kind of communication. And because the hosting is free, and it's really building some valuable transferable skills on this enterprise platform, it's also a really great option for teaching and learning in the classroom. You can have your users, your students, yourself become a creator in the global digital culture rather than just consuming. So it really develops those critical digital literacy skills and shows you some of the fundamentals of the web. Many organizations and individuals are already using GitHub to collaborate on creating and publishing websites. Some really good examples are the Programming Historian, which has been around for quite a while, and the carpentries, software carpentry, data carpentry, library carpentry, where folks come around from around the world are collaborating to create educational resources and share them out and run workshops around the world. So check those out if you haven't heard of them before. There is some limits to GitHub Pages. So the whole thing, your whole repository has to be less than a gigabyte. So it's not like a file hosting service. You can't just dump a whole bunch of images and a whole bunch of audio and a whole bunch of videos into it. This is really more for your code, is really what it's aimed for. So your HTML, your Markdown, your text, you're not going to dump hundreds of PDFs and hundreds of images in there. You can have a few for your website, but you're not gonna, it's not a bulk storage area. There is other ways where you could store it in another service and reference those from your website, and that really works well. So to get started, we're just going to jump right into GitHub and create a repository and start editing some files. So I'm going to pop over to GitHub here. And when you log in, you're going to see something like this. This is a home screen. Mine's pretty busy because I have a lot of different organizations and projects going on. If you're a new user, you might not see very much here. But wherever you are on GitHub, there's always this big plus button in the upper right-hand corner of the nav bar. So you're going to click that plus button, and you're going to select this Create a New Repository option right here, New Repository. So go ahead and click that. So repository is really basically just a folder of files. And so we're essentially creating a new folder on GitHub, and we're going to track all the files together inside that folder. So the owner is going to be you, and then you're going to give it a repository name. And since we're really focused on creating websites, you want to make this repository name something that makes sense on the web. So it's going to become part of the URL, that link to the website. And so don't give any spaces in there. Make it all lowercase. Don't use weird characters. The only things that you can use, that you should use in your name, is some dash or an underscore. So I'm just going to say a new example repo is going to be my name. I use dashes instead of spaces. Everything's lowercase. That's going to make a good URL when it goes on to live on the web. Your next choice here is public or private. Most people make everything public on GitHub. It's an open source platform, and once you publish it to the web is all shared and public, so there's not a real big advantage to making it private. The last thing that you want to make sure that you do is check off this button that says add a README file. And that's just going to add one file into this folder when we get started, which is going to make your life a lot easier for starting off working with this repository. The final thing is to hop down to this big green button that says create repository. On GitHub, green buttons are usually good things, so you're going to go ahead and click that to create this repository. So give it a web safe name, public, add a README, click the green button. All right, so we have a brand new repository here on GitHub. It contains one file right now. This is kind of the representation of that folder, and we have one file name in there, which is readme.md. It's displaying that README file right here, and we have a few tabs along the top of the website here. Issues is an area where you can use to essentially set up little discussions and track projects. So it's a really handy feature that you might be interested in. But I want you to click now on the settings tab here. So settings is where all of the universal settings for the repository are. And what you want to do is scroll down to this GitHub Pages area. And so in this GitHub Pages area, you'll find a box that says source and none. And we're going to go ahead and select the main branch. And that's going to be the source for our website. So our folder files in the main branch is going to be put up and become the website. And you can choose either the folder, the root of the folder, just the base of the folder, or you can choose the docs folder within your repository. So those are the two choices. You can choose any branch, and then you can choose the root or docs folder. So we're just going to keep it as a root, and then you're going to click save to activate GitHub Pages on this repository. If you scroll down, again, you'll see that it's activated, and you're going to see that it gives you the new repository name or the new website name right here. And the website follows the username, github.io/ then the repository name. I'm just going to actually copy that right now. And when I go back to the top, I click on code to go back to the home page of this repository. And I like to just paste that link right into the settings here and save changes. So right here in this about, there's a little cog, and you can click that and save your new link right there just for it to be handy. Now we don't have anything really served up at that website yet, so we're not going to visit it just yet. Let's do a couple other things first. So let's start editing a file and learn a little bit about Markdown. So you'll notice that we have our one file called readme.md, and if you click on that one file in this folder, you pop over to the web page, the home page for the file, and you can see this little pencil icon in the upper right corner of the representation of that file. And so if we click on that pencil, that's going to open up our web editor. And so it's just like a text editor that you might have on your local machine, like Notepad++ or Text Wrangler or TextEdit, but it's here in our web browser, which is really handy when we're getting started here. So README is a convention that's used in all kinds of code projects going back for a very long time. And the basic idea is that it's a place to write all about your repository so that users who get there will understand what it contains, who made it, and any other basic information that they should know. So on GitHub, READMEs are usually written in Markdown, so they have the extension .md, and they're always displayed on the home page of that repository. So it's your first chance to really tell people about what's going on in this repository, make some documentation, make some notes, and link out to the places that they need to go. So we're going to start editing it, and it's in Markdown. So Markdown is a standard to simplify writing content for the web, and it's really designed to be easy to read and to write, compared to doing HTML straight. If you know HTML, which we're going to do in a second, it's a lot of pointy brackets and nested tags and all these other stuff, which is hard to look at, and it's a lot of work to write. So what we're going to do instead is have this really simplified form that's really based on essentially how you would write an email in plain text. And you can use Markdown everywhere in GitHub and in .md files in GitHub. So if we look at a document on the web, so here's our workshop website, and you can see that there's headers and then paragraphs and then lists. These are the kind of the basic building blocks of a website. And so if you look at the top, we have the biggest header is called the header 1. You can see this is a paragraph. This next header is a little bit smaller, and so that's a header 2. Then we have a paragraph, and a paragraph. And we get down here, there's a header 2 again, and then this one, which is a header 3. So it's again a little bit smaller than a header 1 or 2. And so and then a list here that you see. So Markdown is going to provide us the tools to write those kind of very simple markup for your web page in a really easy way. So we can start out. We already have a header 1 here in our repository. So we can just add a paragraph after that. So a paragraph will be any text with no empty lines between it. So if I write another line here, this is still part of that same paragraph. Now inside the paragraph we can also do some inline formatting. So we can make a font italic by putting a asterisk and then closing that with an asterisk. So everything within those two asterisks will be italic, and we can actually make it bold by doing 2 asterisks. So everything between those 2 asterisks would be bold. So it could be 1 word, it can be 2 words, it can be as many words as you want. We can highlight some code by using a back tick and closing it with another back tick. And if I leave an empty line there, that's moving on to a new paragraph. So now I might want to put header 2. A header 2 follows this pattern of header 1 where we just put a hash and we put 2 hashes for header 2. And then you're going to press return and leave a blank line after that header to make sure that it renders as a header. So now we can start another paragraph. And in this paragraph, maybe we want to put a link. And what you want to do to create a hyperlink is a square bracket, and then put the text. And then put another square bracket. Then you're going to put parentheses and write the link or paste in the link that you want to connect to. And then close that with the parentheses. So that's going to end up being a hyperlink in the final rendered HTML of this file. Last thing we want to do, let's do a header 3, which is going to be 1, 2, 3 hash space header 3, leave a blank line after it, and we can create a list after that. So a bullet list looks like this. You leave a space, you're going to do a dash space item number 1 in the list. So I'm going to do cats, press return to go to a new line, and I'm going to do dash space dogs, dash muffins, and that's going to be my list. Numbered list is very similar. I'm going to leave a space, I'm going to press 1 period space, and that's going to be the first item in my list. Then I'm going to do 2 period space, and that's going to be my second item in my list. And the thing is that the actual number is not important. It's going to be renumbered automatically. So it's just the pattern of number, period, space, that's going to end up being a numbered list. Okay, so we got a header 1, we got a paragraph, some inline formatting, italic and bold. We got a header 2, we put a hyperlink in there, header 3, and we got a couple examples of lists. So that's the basics of Markdown. And if you think about your average web page content, especially for something like for a workshop, this is really all you're going to need to write the majority of your content. So we've done some editing in this text editor, and we scroll down, and we're going to find this new box down here at the bottom that says commit changes. So this is the Git part of GitHub, and we need to make a commit, which is a Git concept, which basically is about taking a snapshot of the repository at this moment in time, and then saving those changes that we just made permanently into the repository's history. So every single commit is going to need a username. So it's got me right here. It's going to have an email, which is part of my username here, and a time, which is automatically captured. And you also need to provide a message with every commit. And so the commit message is really your writing your note to yourself of the future. You kind of want it to be very brief, very direct and to the point, and help you understand what changes you're making and why you were doing it. Make it a helpful message, and especially if you're collaborating with other people and collaborating with your future self, it's really great if these are meaningful. So I'm going to say Markdown demo edits. And so that's my commit message. I can go down and just leave the rest of this as it is, and a big green button is going to create the commit, and if I click that, we did a git commit. So you just used Git on the web. And so we can now see our new Markdown rendered on HTML, into HTML here on GitHub, and the styles that it's showing are GitHub's styles for rendering that Markdown. So behind the scenes, GitHub is of course taking that Markdown code that we just wrote and rendering it into HTML. So let's go ahead and go back to the home page of our repository here, and you're going to see again that Markdown is just the first thing on the home page of a repository so that somebody can come to the site and understand what's going on. So just to kind of review how this works and what's going on with HTML in the background is, let's just go ahead and review a little bit about HTML. So most of the web is made up of HTML, hypertext markup language, CSS, cascading style sheets, and JS, JavaScript. And so the HTML is the structure of your document, the content. Each of the elements on the page are tagged, giving their semantic meaning. So you have headings, paragraphs, lists, and other more complicated elements. Cascading style sheets, CSS, provides the style. It's going to change the colors, the fonts, the text size, and the padding and things like this. And so you can separate the presentation and the content from each other. And that's a really important concept in creating content for the web. And then finally, JS is going to give you a programming language specific to the browser that allows you to add a lot of interactivity and create content in different ways. So when you ask for a website with your browser, the server is going to actually send you back all of that code, the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript. So you have all the code for every website that you visit sitting here on your computer. And then it all gets rendered into the websites that we interact with. So that's a really kind of fascinating part of the web, is that everybody actually shares all their code to be a participant in it. And you can look at that code. So if you're on a web page like the one right now, if you right click, you're going to get a option on your context menu that says view page source or view source. And if you click on that, you're actually going to see that HTML of the page that is being displayed in front of you. And so you can actually look at the code and learn about how they made this page, which is pretty fascinating. You can also right-click and choose the option Inspect or Inspect Element, and that's going to open up your browser's built-in developer tools, and you can really explore what's going on, how they built this page, and it's a really great way to learn about HTML and dive deeper into the concepts and see how people are creating the other sites that you enjoy using. So let's go ahead and create HTML file just to cover some of the basics. And we're going to create an index.html, and that's because another convention, index.html, is the home page of a website. The server is just always going to, by default, provide index.html as a home page. So we're going to go over here on GitHub. You're going to see above this kind of folder area is a spot where it says add file. And if you click on that, you're going to have an option saying create new file. So we're just going to click that, create new file. Again, it opens up that editor for us, and this time we need to give it a file name. And so we're going to do index.html. And then click down into the editor to start writing your HTML. So every HTML file should start out with what they call a doc type declaration, and you can just copy that off of the website, and it looks something like that. And it's just a little marker that says, hey, this is an HTML file, so the browser knows what it's working with. Next, it starts with a HTML element, and then we get to close that element. So it's going to be pointy bracket / HTML to close it. And so everything in HTML is going to be these elements, pointy brackets with the element name, and then close that in a pointy brackets. And everything can be nested within that. So our HTML document, everything on the page has to be nested inside that HTML element. The next thing we might want to add in our HTML document here is a head section. So we're going to do pointy bracket, head, pointy bracket, and then we want to close that off. So pointy bracket / head and pointy bracket. And the head section is, we can indent that with tab. The browser will actually ignore the indentation, but it's just helpful for human beings reading it if you do the indentation. The head section is metadata for this document. It's not going to be displayed visually anywhere on the page, but it tells the browser about this document and a lot of other information that helps rendering it. So the head element here, we're going to add one element inside of it. We're going to add title, and you just put some text in there, and then you're going to close it, title, so that this tag title is now marking this bit of text as the title. And this title is going to actually be displayed up in your browser tab here. So the title of this web page is being displayed up in the browser tab. Now we want to put something on the actual page, and everything that displays on the page is going to be in the body element. So we're going to do pointy bracket body, pointy bracket. We're going to go ahead and close that. So close body, put a space in between so that we can write some content in here. And I'm going to indent one just to make it easier to read. So inside our body, let's do the same sort of thing that we did in Markdown. Let's put a header 1. So in HTML, it's pointy bracket h1, pointy bracket. And then we're going to close that with pointy bracket slash h1. So you see the beginning tag and the ending tag will always match. Now we want a paragraph, which is going to be pointy bracket p, pointy bracket. Now everything until we close this paragraph will be one paragraph block on the page. So you can just go find some text to paste in there or write your paragraph out. Header 2, very similar to header 1, is h2, header 2, and always close it. And we can do some inline formatting just like we did with Markdown. So we do a new paragraph with p pointy tags. And if we wanted to make a bold statement, we would do pointy bracket strong, bold text, close that strong, put a period, close the paragraph. If we wanted to add a link into one of our paragraphs, we could do pointy brackets p for the paragraph. And a link is a tag for anchor. So we do pointy bracket a. And then we want to give the link. So we need to give the link as an attribute to this element. And we say href equals, href is hypertext reference, equals, and then we're going to put a quote. And then we're going to actually want to paste the URL, the link into there. So we'll do https://github.com. And then we got to put a quote to end that, put a pointy bracket, and then we'll say GitHub home, and then we got to close that a tag, period, and then we're going to close the paragraph tag. So our link here, if you take a look, we have an a tag, and inside the pointy brackets we have this href, which is an attribute to that element, and that's how we'd create a link. So you can see it's a lot easier to go ahead and write in Markdown rather than having to write all these pointy brackets out. Once we have this set up, we can go ahead and do the next step, which is commit. So we'll scroll down to the commit new file area. And so again, we can use Git in the web browser, and we always need to provide a commit message. So create a new homepage to demo HTML. And to create the commit, we have to click the big green button, and that's going to save this file into our repository and put these changes into the history. Okay, so we look now on our homepage. We actually have two files here rather than just one. And we actually have a little bit of history in our repository now. So let's go ahead and take a look at that history before we browse our new amazing website. So in this little file area, you're going to see that there's this word that says 3 commits, and that's a link to look at your history of this repository. So if you go ahead and click on commits, all of our history, each of these commits that we make is going to be stored here permanently with this repository. And you can see the commit message, you can see who did it and when they did it. And if you want to see the changes that you've made during this commit, you can actually click on this little hash over here, this weird number over on the right hand side. So I'm just going to open that up and take a look. And so this gives you the message again, and then it shows you the files that were changed during this commit, and what was added and what was deleted. The other thing that is important for GitHub Pages is take a look at this little green checkbox. GitHub Pages, when it's activated, is going to take all the files that are in your repository, and at every single commit, it's going to make a new copy of them and deploy it to the web. So if you have a green check here, that means it's done with that process. Your new file should be live on the web, ready to view. If you get a red X, it means something bad happened. It's not going to happen with just plain HTML like this, but sometimes you might have done something to break your Jekyll code, and then you'll see the red X, and you're going to have to go and debug what the problem is. So we have a green check. That means we're ready to go view our new website. And again, that website is going to follow the pattern of username.github.io/repository name. And you can see your username here, and you can see your repository name here. So you can put that together, that little recipe together if you want. And I already saved my URL here, so I'm just going to go ahead and click on that to see what we got. And we have a wonderful new website homepage that we just wrote by hand in HTML. And you're going to see that we have a header 1, big text, we have a paragraph, a little bit smaller text, we have a bold, and we have our little link here to GitHub. The styles that we're seeing here are whatever is the default of your web browser, which change from browser to browser. So we haven't added any style or CSS, we've only written some HTML. But that's the basics of how you'd create an HTML file. So the last thing on the workshop website for this section is to go ahead and take a look at this reference section. We have a bunch of good learning resources for Git and GitHub. If you're going to use GitHub a lot, it's really helpful to make sure that you have a good understanding of what's going on there. The GitHub Learning Lab is really helpful with a lot of walkthroughs on how to do stuff. There's also a couple of resources here about Markdown that you can learn more about that and how you could use it for writing content. There's also some tutorials on HTML if you get interested in that. We're not going to have to write a ton of HTML to keep going with Jekyll, but it is good to have that under your belt to understand how things are being pulled together. So stay tuned for the next video in the series where we'll look a little bit more in Jekyll and we'll build a blog. But for now, I'm going to be signing off, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks.